Hello, hello, hello. So, this is your girl BMORE, and today we are going to get into the full moon in Scorpio. I know this is like 2 days late, but again, it's still going to apply because we got like 2 weeks until the next lunar cycle starts, and that will be in Gemini. So, we already talked about the new moon in Taurus, and so now we're seeing the ramifications or the awareness that new moon brought with the sun and the moon opposing in Taurus and Scorpio. So in new moons, when we have those, the signs, the planets, excuse me, the sun and the moon are together, and they're making almost like a tunnel vision focus, which is great for beginnings and initiations. But to some extent, it can also create forms of like blindsidedness and even ignorance. Here, when we have full moons, at the worst, it can create conflict, but at the best, it can bring awareness and attraction. And so, whatever we started towards the end of April, I think it was like around the 27th, whatever we started then, or whatever was our focus then, now with this full moon, we're having more centered focus and more awareness. And if we aren't, we're having events, drama, conflicts that come as a byproduct of that. That's why it's very important that we understand the moon's role in combination with other planets and what it brings to our forms of consciousness. And that is what we will be talking about today. So, today, oh, if y'all hear my papers flipping, that's just me looking through the notes that I wrote. So, today the moon will be in Scorpio. And the thing about Scorpio is it is a Martian sign, and Mars signs, along with Venus, they are not the most stable. I can argue the most stable will probably be Mercury. It's stable in its exaltation. It's stable in its domiciles and it's also in homes, and it's also stable in to some extent in its falls. Meaning, like, it kind of makes just a plus sign. It's no weird angles in when it hits into these things. Unlike something like Mars, where it has like a 8-6 combo, where it's 8 signs away while also being 6 signs away. And so we get things like obstacles, conflicts, and enemies, diseases. It's a very complicated planet. And I'm going to put Venus up there too. So here in Scorpio, the thing with Scorpio is that it wants us to understand the idea of Mars from a more feminine pursuit. It's the female half of the Martian energy. So Aries is the masculine display of Mars, and Scorpio is the feminine display. I am saying this in response to how they respond. Sometimes gender, like literally the gender, and going down to the types of genitalia or body parts people have that's played with in astrology, or the lack thereof. Um, but here we are talking about the behavioral responses of the signs. So Scorpio is the feminine response to Mars. It is subversive, response, like almost like reactive to some extent. Um, but it's also a water sign that also adds to the femininity. So it benefits off of stability, institutions, and structure. It's not necessarily one to some extent go outside of the crowd. You know, can it still experience that while trying to be inside the crowd? Yes, but it's, how can I say this? It's usually in proximity. The best way I can say this is it's the proximity of like the other signs reacting to it. Um, but yes, it is a institutional sign. It does do great in institutions and structures. It can rule sex, legacy, violence, really getting to the necessities of life. Like, what do you actually need and what can we release? Also, dealing with people's desires, resources, other people's power, Exploration, secrets, jealousy, being possessive, control, and the unseen things. So things that are powerful, things that aren't seen, and also like things like crime. So like things that are powerful, unseen is like crime, sex, death. You see what I'm getting? So these are like Martian forces, but we don't really get to see them. Versus like Aries, which is like Martian forces that we do like blatantly see. We blatantly see people fighting. Crime is like, okay, we're still trying to figure out who did it. Y'all see what we're getting here. Mars, which is the lord of Scorpio, deals with tools, fires, things like, and when I mean tools, I things like cars and things that we build. Um, deals with brothers, friends, enemies, injuries, inflammations, surgery, infections, energy levels, logic. Mars is the planet of logic. I remember I was talking about this in another stream. I think it was like a Patreon stream. I was talking briefly on with Sin and Prince, and I was just telling people like sometimes I know people like to go into Mercury as why people aren't sharp, but afflicted Mars or Mars in difficult placements can make people illogical. Mars is one of its inclinations outside of troublemaking is to build things that are of tools or that are resourceful that other people can use and pass down. That's why, like, for instance, the eighth house or Scorpio is synonymous with inheritances. So people are creating things that other people can use to pass down. When people have afflicted Marses and they're nothing is making sense, baby. I'm trying to let you land, but I really just can't. Like, I don't know what the heck is going on with you. I don't know what's going on. Up from down, there is no order here. Everything is out of order. But that's could be an issue with the Mars thing. Like, if I tell you, you know how like someone like you give someone instructions to do something and they just can never figure it out. Like they can't put the lid back on the cap. They don't know where nothing is. Like everything is just gone wrong. Baby, it might be your Mars. It might be your Mars. I know people like my Mercury's exalted, baby, but that Mars not. The Mars is not. So we might not have any common sense about ourselves. And sometimes you can see that with afflicted Mars. Like you have no common sense. But yeah, so this deals with logic, science, blood at being actionary, aggression, initiations, and wounds. It also is ruled by Pluto, which is destructive forces, reforming things, intensity, um, elimination, things that we get rid of, reproduction, the underworld, hidden wealth, dealing with the masses, waste, atomic power, gas, things like that. Also can deal with like obsessions, beginnings and endings, birth and death, regeneration, complexity, being alone, and sometimes being alone and unaided. I can see that too with like Pluto placements. Like you're by yourself, no one's helping you, no one's coming. So here we see the ruler of this moon, Scorpio, in the sign of right over here, Leo. And so Leo and Mars have a very interesting placement because I'll just show it to you. So here we have the home of Mars, which is Scorpio. Hopefully this is showing up on the screen. But here if you see the Scorpio sign, which is at the bottom, you see like the fourth house. It's like the inner ring with the houses. And you go and you see the Scorpio is here associated with it. So that's one of the homes of Scorpio. And then we go on and go up to ninth, and you see that the Aries symbol here. Okay, so both of these are associated with Mars. Okay. But Mars is here in Leo. And so the problem is Leo is a fixed sign. Scorpio is a fixed sign. Aries is a cardinal sign. So because both of these are fixed in the same mode, they're going to square. But these are both fire signs, so they're going to trine. So from the male exertion point, we're good. The female exertion point, we is not good, girl. We is not good. Like we're ankles weak. Okay, we cannot get through it. So this by default is going to create action, conflicts. This right here, from Leo going into Aries, is going to create ease. So Leo to Scorpio, conflict action. Scorpio to Aries, ease, you know, it's going to be very easy. Okay, there's not going to be much difficulty. So that's kind of the vibe that we're getting. And then we also have Pluto in a fixed sign too, because this is making a fixed, what we call like a fixed cross. It's giving fixed cross energy. But Pluto is in Aquarius, which is another fixed sign. Okay, it's home in Scorpio. We talked about it in the fourth house. So Pluto is sitting up in the seventh house in Aquarius. You notice it's squaring back on Scorpio because they're both fixed signs. And then it's squaring up in Taurus because Taurus is also a fixed sign. But it's making positive aspects to Aries over here. There's a little cluster right here, which is the masculine version or the masculine expression of Mars. So we're having some issues with the idea of Scorpio, and it is looking a little bit under attack. And so the only real ease that we're truly getting here through the behavior is from taking on more outwardly Aryan approaches. At least that would be one of them. Okay. So let's get into describing some of the events. The moon will be sitting in a star called Unakalhai, which is the neck or the heart of the serpent. This here creates a lot of immorality, accidents, violence, poison, crime, bold and shameless action. We can have a lot of things where people have a rise, they're sitting on top of the world, and then they're crashing. Okay. And so we can receive or see people who have danger of destruction. We can see people with danger from chronic illnesses. Sometimes the illnesses are there, but no one knows about them. And so people may have to get surgery. They may have infections. We can also see people who are debasers of crafts where they're supposed to take care of people. So like people who are debasers of like doctors, you know, even debasers of people who are of astrology where it can be drama. And so people can be struck down from here. And in the constellation of the serpents, we see that this brings people who are crafty and wise while also being deceitful and malicious, you know. And so this also deals with mines, minerals, resurrection, trying to bring things up, things coming back up, and being brought up back from the dead. This is also associated with Asclepius, which is the Greek god of healing, and it's in the other constellation Ophiuchus. And Asclepius was the healer on the Argo. So you heard of the story of Jason and the Argonauts where they traveled to get the golden fleece. Well, Asclepius was on the Argo healing people. And so here we're dealing with the blood of Medusa, which is the left side, which is poisonous, and then the right side is medicine. And so we could see people be possibly abusers of poisons, abusers of feminine energy or feminine tactics. And we can also see people try to course correct and possibly even heal these types of things. We can see quarrels, disappointments, people affected by maybe a death of a family member. These could be preferment in writings, politics, pretty much a bold personality. But these would be legal entanglements. I would really advise people to be mindful of the environments they keep, same as before, because there's a propensity this month for people to get caught up in evil spaces, and whether they're revealing evil or they are kind of like reveling in evil practices. And so y'all should watch that. They can have a rebellious attitude where people are hateful of authority, and maybe people even get caught up in plots or intrigues, or plots are trying to be exposed. People should be careful because this could really just, I got the best way I can say it, this could come out troublesome or maybe even lead into like more embarrassment, you know. And so that is something to think about. You know, we do see people that maybe be tempted to maybe sacrifice or make sacrifices for people or things, thinking that it's the right thing to do. but really we can come out with a lot of bitterness or having to work very hard, having a lot of opposition, and then we meet more success, because Scorpio is a placement where people have to fight off competitors. It's a Martian sign, so you have to fight off people, fight off competitors, fight off enemies, and then we have success, which can make people very sarcastic, very stubborn, very bitter in speech. We also see where people can have poor vision. You know, they are blind, they're not seeing things clearly because they're rash, they're combative, and this can kind of create ruin because they won't adapt, they won't change. And this is because we have the constellation Perseus, which is the prince of the stars, and he kills Medusa in a display of overt primal masculinity. But the problem with Perseus is not that he's not intelligent or brave, but he tends to lie a lot, and he tends to be in these situations, particularly with where the stars are, he tends to be very hard headed and overly ambitious. So we have to make sure our determination and our focus isn't necessarily getting us into trouble where we're lacking vision and it's creating self destruction. Because I told y'all before, the fixed signs really deal with acts of survival and people having to survive things. That's why I told y'all at the top of the month, really try to be careful what we're putting our focus on and where we're going, because you don't want to have to, by the time that full moon comes around, like work really really hard to offset or combat some of these things that we kind of initiated. Now the good thing is, can make people like ambitious to go after like enterprising endeavors, having success with the public, but it can make people very pushy and headstrong and temperamental, um while also being sensitive and maybe have some difficult issues to really kind of like really put their finger on it. We do see more introspection for some people who are dealing with this introspection, because we're in Zurich or Arachnius, which is the river. It can kind of make people feel like life is a constant struggle. They feel overwhelmed by their struggles. They maybe even feel like sad. At the worst, it can be melancholy and suicidal. But at the most, it could just be just kind of just sad. It creates a person who is private. People who are, they strive for success nonetheless, and maybe they could be like hypochondriac. So like particularly for people who are struggling like with disease or maybe some type of mystery illness does like rear its head. Try not to be too worried about it. Like, I'm not saying that don't be concerned, but like don't be almost like a hypochondriac. Like just kind of take it easy, because this can like trigger like insecurities. And they could be long, like I said, long drawn out illnesses, but again, it's coming to our awareness now, so let's just try to, do our best to take care of it. And so sometimes we feel like we're going through difficult times, but sometimes it's just the idea like we're a little bit weary of this kind of just keep going on, like it's a never ending story. And that's kind of just how it feels, because to be honest, the constellation of redness does span for a long time. It's really a river, but it spans for a long time. So we can see many changes, people feeling overwhelmed, maybe grief, and I'm not saying we're expecting people to pass away, but, really mourning things and just having to get over um, our attachments and things like that. So that could just be a thing, but really it could also just show up as like the most minor thing is like being deeply affected by your home, your life, your family environment. And so maybe there could be difficulties there. Maybe we're very serious, and maybe like in our home we need things to be like a particular way, or we're maybe not content with like how our home life is going. The good thing is that this placement does give perseverance. It gives determination. And you can even attract people that can help you. They can be preferment in getting like people to like, pay attention to you in the public. Um but there could be some disappointment in, I guess you could say, military affairs. I guess the best way I would translate that is to like disappointment in coordinated plots. Like coordinated things that you thought was gonna go. Like you had a plan, the plans aren't planning type of thing. So Sometimes when we also see like I said, a rise and a fall, I want to be very clear. You can get awarded something and it might not last long either. So like, yeah, we can see people like start at the top and then they crash out. But the other thing is like you get like, yeah, and then it's like, okay, it's over. Let's wrap this up. So we can experience that too. I don't want everybody to think like, okay, I get something and then I'm just gonna crash out, like, or something bad's gonna happen. Eh, maybe because there are constellations where people can like you get awarded for something, but the award or the authority basically kills you. So like you become king and then you die because you became king. Something like, I guess that's the best way I can translate that. But this isn't that. Yes, you can get a rise and fall, but you can also just get an award and then everything dissipates quickly, just as quickly as it came. So it's kind of like, I got something, now it's over. So um let's see. I think that's pretty much it as far as on the constellation tip. Let's talk about some aspects. So this month we're seeing some aspects where we're really touching on things that deal with Lilith um and its behaviors. And so here we see, I know you guys really like Lilith. So we see Lilith making some hard aspects to Mars and Pluto and Mercury. So if you go down to here where Scorpio is in the fourth house and you look at 5 degrees, that is Lilith. And so Lilith is our primal survival instincts, but it's also where we can have rejection, shame, and where we can have like taboo forms of expression, particularly taboo forms of feminine expression, because the moon is a feminine planet. And this is the moon developing. It's almost like this. The moon is losing strength because a strong moon gives us a strong mind. It gives us strong emotions, safety. We can help relate to other people. It helps with the forms of habits and the rhythm, and also gives us happiness and contentment. So it gives us the soma, the contentment of life, which can also affect Mercury and Venus. Um, we see these types of things. We see these types of things. So think of, to some extent, think of Lilith as some form of the moon, is less friendly, less receptive, more disturbed, more ferocious, and we're materializing more sometimes of the dark side or the negative side of the moon. Okay. So here, the moon and Lilith, they're both in Scorpio. And so we're seeing things like dark and taboo emotions, dark and taboo things with mothers, like, so we're seeing the dark mother, or like, I guess you could say like a bitch mom, or a mom that's not nice, we're seeing dark things or taboo things that come out from the past, maybe things we thought was shameful, or maybe things we thought we would hide. We could see split personalities, split personas, repressed emotions, weird or taboo things that go on in people's homes or houses, or things that even deal with like foods or habits that no one knew about. And this is also going to center around women too, because again, we have Lilith, but in particular, is sitting beside the moon in Scorpio. And the moon in Scorpio is not even strong. Like, the moon in Scorpio has issues, and I can explain why it's not really strong, based off of like domicile and exaltation, because really it's opposing its exaltation. So it's kind of making wonky things, because it's at home in Cancer, and that's the 12th, and then the exaltation is the 10th house in Aquarius, and it's opposing that. So it's kind of making kind of like a little wonky shape right now. Okay, so no, it's not the most stable, and to some extent, here the moon sitting outside Lilith, the moon is changeable and it's restless, you know, And here in Scorpio, Scorpio is a water fixed sign. It's not the water part that's really the problem. It's that it's a water sign that is fixed, meaning that it doesn't change. Fixed signs maintain things. They either keep things or they release things. They either keep it or give it away. So now we're dealing with things where the moon has to regulate things like it regulates patterns. So when the moon is in Scorpio, sometimes it's hard for people to regulate emotions, regulate healthy habits and patterns that are normal. But also at the same time, things that we're supposed to have some wiggle room into releasing or allowing the moon to move around in restlessness, like it changes shapes. Um, we're not getting that because it's very fixed. So like holding on to negative emotions or memories longer than we should, getting very irritable with everything, getting irritable with things that are sometimes even inconsequential. Like it's not going to matter long term. You know, that's why the moon is not necessarily the best here in its positioning. Like it's not stable. And it's not like it can't be in a fixed sign. Its exaltation is Taurus. It does do well there, but it's it's just it's not. We're holding on to things that we should not. It's also ruled by a Martian sign too. So it's like it got a couple of things that makes it a bit difficult to deal with. So we see those types of things. Um and its positioning, we also see that it is opposing the sun, Uranus, Mercury. Here when the sun and Lilith are opposing, we can have issues with our fathers, issues with children, sexuality and creativity, sometimes even friendships, having issues to be our authentic self. Who is your authentic self? And maybe people are rejecting your authentic self, rejecting fathers, kids are being rejected. We're not getting recognized for talents. Maybe the talents are taboo, maybe the father is taboo. Issues with freedom and rebellious natures, and a fear of rejection and a fear of non-conformity. So people are going out of their way to conform to something maybe they don't believe in themselves, because that's the other caveat, because the sun is the self, and we can be rejecting ourselves or rejecting the idea that maybe there's something about us that is taboo, rejecting our shame or where we have shame, um or rejecting where we don't conform to society and we are well aware of that, or basically we're basically going to find out with this transit, but finding out that we're coming into awareness of where we don't conform, where we have issues with being ourselves. We also have Lilith opposing Uranus, because it's opposing these things in Taurus, and so this can be issues with magic, issues with science, issues with the idea of freedom, because Uranus is the planet of freedom, or it's the planet of awakening things. So it's awakening Taurian things. However, there's a opposition, and Lilith is dealing with survival. Lilith is dealing with revenge, shame, guilt. And so maybe we're getting things that are coming into our consciousness that maybe we're feel like, okay, I do want this. I see this for myself. Or I feel a subconscious urge to do something, and we're rejecting the subconscious urges. Um, so we can have issues with causes, like people rallying around a certain cause and we're like, look, I don't believe in that. I'm doing my own thing. And it is awakening this thing within us, but we're also kind of at odds with it, or we're becoming aware um of the what we want to be awakened. I guess that's the best way I can say it. And so people, there can be issues with technology, the internet, groups. Sometimes people rebelling against rebellions. So people, they feel like they are rebellious natures, they're shameless, they're doing taboo things, they're vengeful, and maybe people are rebelling against their behaviors. There can be issues with queerness, issues with humanitarianism, men of service, humility, forced changes that we do not prefer, destructions of traditions, and even flights. So like catching a plane, all sort of stuff. Here with Mercury, Lilith performs in a way where you try to free your mind. You want to travel. You want to sometimes even escape the ideas around thought. Um, Maybe there's a rejection in communication skills, feeling like your siblings are rejecting you, relatives. Um, Maybe we're at odds where maybe you are ashamed for a skill or an ability that you have. You try to be of service and you are not allowed to be of service. Maybe there's an issue with certain forms of consciousness. Maybe your perception isn't what you think it is. And so how we learn things, forms of our education, how we analyze things maybe weren't correct. Um, Maybe we're ashamed of how we analyze things. Maybe we are how we analyze things were seen as taboo, or even seen as inappropriate. You know, so we dealing with the ideas of work, music, food, shopping, things like dealing with business, or we're exchanging, or kind of like facilitating between these two. Here we do have the sun in opposition in Taurus. The sun, it doesn't necessarily prefer Venus signs. It's not the worst thing, but it it's not the best thing either. But the sun here in Taurus isn't that bad. We also have Uranus here, and then we have Mercury. And so when the sun, Uranus, and Mercury all kind of conjunct over here, we have someone who is a forceful thinker, impulsive, ambitious, creative. Maybe they're reflective and introspective, but there's an egocentricness, there's an inflexibility and a stubbornness. That people lack objectivity and they can get into tunnel vision. Hence why we're over here with the opposition of rebellion. I don't agree with you, or people are holding on to emotions more, or holding on to things more than they normally would. So people are less flexible. The fixed signs are not necessarily known for their dexterity. Sometimes they can be very stubborn. Very, very, very stubborn. So here the moon also trines Saturn and Neptune. And when the moon does that, we try to be emotionally balanced. That's the positive thing. Um, it gives people certain forms of emotional balance, some thoughtfulness and consciousness, even some type of conservative response. So although we may feel like, no one gets me, or things aren't going how I thought they were, it does give us a minute to, put things into perspective and have some form of type of reflection. The other thing is it can help with public publicity in a sense, or like public advancement. We also have where we can manage our emotions a bit better because of this, and possibility to maybe even benefit from a parent or some type of authority figure. Here the moon trines Neptune, so we can be, like I said, more emotional, but there can sometimes be unusual desires. We can overly idealize love, but it does make a very warm and genuine nature. People who are attracted to art. And we also see themes centered around like oils, liquids, shipping, the film industry, or theater. Um, the moon here also makes a trine to these types of things. And so we see in Aries. So we see a calm, cheerful, artistic nature, a balanced mind, and good perception. So these people, they're able to have like a charm. They're very refined. It's good for like interacting with people, but I would tell people not to be too indulgent, not to spend too much. We have Lilith over here at the bottom, it squares Mars, and it's also on a square Pluto. And the thing is, people can reject logic, things that make sense. Is people, they don't want to make sense. They don't want to. I don't want peace. I don't want things that make sense. I don't want A plus B equals C. They don't want none of that. But it does give people sometimes, we come up with something, or there's ingenuity, and people they even reject that. They can have issues with men. Sometimes people can have issues with their reproductive systems, so like their genitals. Sometimes issues with actually having sex, with people who are struggling with that. Sometimes people are having issues with their psychology, tools, so like driving, fire, surgery, self-expression issues, people trying to assert themselves or be assertive, issues with fighting, maybe people who are rejecting it, they're trying to shame you. um maybe it's seen as taboo, or we can also be possibly impulsively fighting, impulsively, getting into these power and control dynamics. It also squares Pluto. Pluto's retrograded right now, by the way. And so we see people trying to defend their wealth, um, getting into issues around the idea of crime, transformation. Maybe there can be issues with eliminating things, letting things go. So we can see things of like even just letting things go through your system. So if you wake up and maybe you have like an infection or you have like really bad agony, the elimination cycle in the body is not, something is blocking it. Like it's not moving how it's supposed to move. Okay. So we see people dealing with psychology, sexuality, and overall survival and life and death issues. The moon also opposes Uranus, and so this creates stubborn intelligence, but also almost like a fanatical, emotionally intense, restless energy. People who are very touchy, incidents where people are impulsive, and really have to learn how to compromise, how to better get along with other people, um, really deal with our attachments, because we can maybe be oddly attached to relationships and things. This can create issues with the opposite sex, infidelity, changes in people's home life, changes in attitudes. Often people misunderstand you, and we need to really learn patience. Instead of jumping to conclusions, try to find a source of where these things are coming from, and do I really want more individuality or do I want freedom? And maybe I'm struggling with that, like we talked about before with Lilith, having weird aspects where people are struggling or trying to suppress the freedom urge that they're having, or suppress forms of their identity. And it's creating all of this kind of, I can really argue, like just bitchiness and conflict. So we really have to get to the bottom of that. There can be issues sometimes with electronics, electricity, women, friends, groups of people, organizations. But we also have them bring, these types of things also can bring opportunities. Like I said, the opposition can bring conflict, but it can also bring awareness, depending on how people see things, how people internalize things. And that is where you have free will. These kind of things always go on, but people have choices of how they're going to internalize things or work with whatever the energy is. We don't have to move a certain way unless we want to. The moon opposes Mercury as well, so we're seeing unreasonable, mixed feelings, I guess I could say. So people are very moody while also being unreasonable. Um, and I would tell people, if they're making decisions, try to take your time, because we can be overly sensitive, very sarcastic, and high strung and restless. And so take your time when doing things. Learn how to compromise. Like I said before, if you have to have an important conversation or discussion, try to push it back. And if you are going to have one, let's just focus on the facts. Let's not get emotional, because it's already, as we talked about before, it's a lot of emotional, psychological triggering, trauma, a lot of stuff going on. Maybe people don't feel well, their health is, maybe they're getting caught up with this health transit. But just try to stick to the facts. Let's just keep it simple. Let's keep it factual. If you feel like the person really can't do that, like they really are troublemaking, because I told you, some people are evil, they troublemaking, they getting into power struggles, they're just difficult for no freaking reason. Just try to postpone it if you can. Okay? And I would say, if you're trying to do maybe like business, because I understand like there's some people they're trying to go on with life or whatever. Just be careful with investments, real estate, vehicles, all that. If someone's trying to pressure you or push you into doing things, if you aren't sure, don't do it. Okay? That's the best thing I can tell you. If you are not sure, don't do it. Okay? But the main thing is learning to be adaptable, learning to be compromising and not be so um volatile. The other thing I think too we should work on, um having a struggle with authority, because we see more authoritative things sometimes slip in. Who has authority here, who doesn't? That can also be a thing with this kind of layout. And although we're very clever, we're tactful, we're diplomatic, um we're able to get people to see things our way. There can be issues with authority figures. So I think people should also understand what that is. You know, sometimes people are falsely making themselves the authority, but sometimes people do have the authority in situations. And so we should be able to tell the difference. You know, we should also tell the difference too between blind zeal and blind devotion versus nagging, pessimism, and quarreling. You know, like, are we devoted or are we troublemaking? Can you tell the difference? You know, taking unnecessary risk. Try to convert this into doing like research, problem solving, medicine. Maybe you get a self help book, get your psychology together, or find new ways that we can express ourselves, because we have powerful thoughts at this time. And we can use this to program our thoughts towards improving ourselves, finding more constructive ways that we can see the big picture. You know, less on the manipulation, less on the obsession and the depression if you can help it, you know, and more on the self-improvement end. Now, granted, the manipulation and troublemaking, you could be a recipient of it from other people, but you too can also project this out to other people as well. So I really would suggest, like I said, try to use this. Is really good for like programming your things together, like getting, you know, getting your ish together, figuring out what you want and going after it, instead of just wasting time trying to tell other people what to do, because we're afraid. We're afraid to be ourselves. We're afraid to express ourselves. We're afraid that we may want something different, because that's the thing too. Like, Uranus is kind of like involved in this, so it's like we're awakening a desire that we had, and the desire may be scorpionic in nature. The desire may be Venusian in nature. So I need us to be real with ourselves. So like maybe awaken the desire to compete. Okay, that's great. Let's find healthy ways to do that without like finding a way to like go oppressing and harassing the public. Because like I said, I do see things for crime here. And I'm not trying to hear nobody say they got caught up in some shenanigans, you know? So use that for that. You can also use it for like imaginative work. So like things like visions, art, music, you know, things that are like good for speculation. So some expect business, stocks, some science, romance, you know, try to take things in stride, but use it for something like that, you know, instead of harassing people. That's really the main thing. I will also say like success will come through your own efforts. You know, the more effort you put to just kind of just putting in the work, the better things will be for you. The better things will be for you. Okay? That is my main thing. Um, y'all please be safe. I don't want to hear no one calling me, hitting me up about nothing um crazy going on. But like just try to use it for like artistic pursuits, having fun. Um Try not to spend too much money. That's another thing. I see, like, try to just we having fun but not too much, you know? Um but yeah, cuz not going to lie, Not going to lie. Um, Low key a little bit ghetto. Low key. Um, I just want y'all to fly straight. Also, if you get rejected from like a establishment or having to learn to deal with restrictions, that is okay too. Don't be so indulgent. You know, like if someone rejects you or something isn't going well, or they like no, take that in stride. Learn to deal with restrictions or work within the restrictions you have. You know, also say no when people try to make things your responsibility that is not yours. Like do not take on other people's things, because when you accept that, you can also take on the karmas that go with that. So if it ain't got nothing to do with you, try to just mind your business. Okay. But when you do take on opportunities, your opportunities may require some extra effort. So don't be, you know how we have like the little some of the sad girl transits kind of going on. Don't be too sad. Like kind of bummed out things aren't going your way. That's okay, because it has a little bit of rejection going on, like we talked about earlier. Rejection, suppression, identity issues, psychological. For some people that is their thing. Some people was getting sick. Some people are committing crimes. A lot of things are going on with this one. As you can see, the fixed signs are very busy. But when you are given the opportunity, it may take more effort. You may have to work harder these next 2 weeks, and that's okay. You might get rejected, and that's okay. Don't compare yourself to other people. You stay locked in. You know, when they're sidebar, if there's like any weather updates where somebody say like it's like a storm or anything crazy, take it serious. But don't get too crazy. Don't spend too much. Don't be too indulgent. Just try to be disciplined and practical as much as possible. I would also say avoid fair weather people. You only see them when things going good. They really can't do nothing for you. Okay? Don't overschedule yourself. If someone promises like a fast turnaround or something, and I can get this done for you in this amount of time, and all you got to do is let me flip 2 chairs over and cornrow the back of your head, something really crazy, just say no. Don't let people try to overly convince you with things. You don't want to get caught up into false hopes and false promises. And then you don't want to also get caught up with people are taking advantage of you either. And that if worse come to worse, if you want to try something, please try to find some helpful advice, okay? Okay. So that is the full moon. I know people are looking like, what? I'm like, yeah, self-improvement and take your butts to the doctors. That is my main thing. And don't go to jail. That is my main thing for y'all. Do not go to jail. Take y'all butts to the doctors. Don't spend too much money. Realistically. All right. Use this for creative endeavors. The second half with the rising signs is going to be in a separate video. And I'll have that up for you. You guys can listen to your rising signs for the next 2 weeks, because I think the next new moon is at the end of the month, the 26th. Yeah, I'm telling y'all, it's going to be in about 12 days to 2 weeks. So all of this grueling energy, rejection, shame, people, things not going your way. This is one to bypass, because this happened like 2 days ago. It happened on the 12th. So like y'all just eat it. You're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. Okay? But just try not to get caught up in none of this nonsense, all of this crazy confusion. And I really mean it. If you are in a dangerous place or you're not sure if it's dangerous, don't go. Don't go. But yes, the second half, the second reading will be in another video. Okay. All right, guys. Take care. Love you. Bye.